Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on the show that covers East Africa in the way only we can. You're watching Bottomline East Africa here on KTN News, where you get the whole story. Good evening and welcome to the program. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole. Let's take a look at what we have in store for you tonight. Deadlocked. South Sudan's rebel leader Riek Machar issues demands ahead of his return to Juba. Tactical retreat. Reports that Al-Shabaab have retaken a Somali town after Kenyan troops withdrew. Still strong at 72, President Denis Sassou Nguesso gets his party's nod to vie for a third term in Congo. All right, welcome to the program. We want to start off with matters regarding the peace deal in South Sudan. Now, South Sudanese opposition leader Dr. Riek Machar says he will not return to Juba to form a unity government unless President Salva Kiir rescinds his decision to create 18 new states in the country. He has asked Uganda's president to put pressure on President Salva Kiir to fully implement the August 2015 peace agreement. He was speaking at a news conference in Kampala, Uganda, where he met President Yoweri Museveni earlier today. We'll be having that report from KTN's Solomon Serwanja in just a minute. But let's just take you back a little bit and remind you of some of those resolutions in that peace deal that came about 20 months after the conflict in South Sudan. You'll remember there was that conflict for 20 months, and that was after President Salva Kiir sacked his then Vice President Riek Machar. Now, that peace deal, like we told you, was signed on August the 25th. It was a deal that was brokered by IGAD, and these are just some of those, and we'll try to see how far it is with implementation. Now, there was, of course, the call for immediate ceasefire within 72 hours of the signing of that agreement. Now, from August to date, there have been constant accusations from both sides over violations of the peace deal. Or of the ceasefire. So we're not too sure about full implementation of this aspect. And then there was this one, that military forces were to be confined to barracks. Not only that, there are also foreign military forces there, specifically the Ugandan People's Defense Forces, that went in when the conflict began, saying they were trying to prevent a genocide in South Sudan. So this was one of the things that all foreign forces were to leave Juba, and this did actually happen, and we reported this here on Bottomline East Africa. In November 2015, the UPDF left Juba, and the SPLA soldiers took over control of some of those bases that were under UPDF, that is in Nesitu. There was also the Juba airport and Bor. There's also a 12,600 UN force that is set to take up that gap that was left by UPDF. Here was another one, that there were to be no troops within a 25-kilometer radius of the capital, Juba. Another important tenet of the peace deal that was signed in August last year was the one about child soldiers and prisoners of war who were to be released. This we can report some progress on. About 13 POWs as prisoners of war were released in December last year, and these were allied to the group we now call the opposition. They were called the rebels at the time. And then, of course, this is an important one. The opposition was to get the first vice president position, and that was, of course, is set to go to Dr. Riek Machar, who's the current opposition leader. And then, of course, a transition government was to be formed, and this was to begin 90 days after the signing of the deal, and it's supposed to last 30 months. And we'll get to what happens after 30 months in just a moment. But this is where we have a sticky point, because this is yet to happen. It's more now than 90 days since this was signed in August last year. This was another one. The signatories to this peace deal were to apologize unconditionally for the killings of civilians. And then finally, we're talking about that transitional government that was to be formed. Sorry, that's a bit of a repetition there. But what was interesting was that the elections were to be held 60 days before the end of that transitional unity government, which, if you calculate, would be around early 2018. Here's another one on how they were to share the ministerial posts. The government was to have 53% of the ministerial posts, and this is at a national level. And the rebels or the opposition ministerial posts were to take up 33%, and the others were to have the remaining seats. So this is the situation we have. A bit of progress in some areas, a bit of not so much in others. And this is why Dr. Riek Machar is in Uganda today and had those talks with President Yoweri Museveni. So we want to get some more perspective on that now and would like to speak on phone to Mabior Garang Mabior, who was there and joins us now by phone. Mabior, good evening and thank you for joining us on Bottomline East Africa.
Good evening.
Great, thanks. Let's start by talking about the nature of the talks today and perhaps the expected outcome of those talks in Uganda.
Yes, thank you. This was a culmination of a process that we had here in Uganda, and there was something which was there was a committee called the Uganda Peace Support Team. It was headed by Salim Saleh, and on our side it was General Alfred Lado Gore that was our chair. And this started in August 2014. We went there between the 18th and the 21st, and we signed something called the Kampala Outcome, which was a communique that was issued on that date. So among the points in this communique was a meeting between our two leaders, President Yoweri Museveni and Dr. Riek Machar. So we've been working with the Ugandans, and this is a culmination of that because of our belief that Uganda holds the key to peace in South Sudan.
All right, when you say Uganda holds the key, what are your specific expectations of this talks? We understand Dr. Riek Machar has said he is not returning to Juba until some of these issues are ironed out, specifically to do with the creation of the new states in South Sudan.
Yeah, Uganda was played a role in the conflict, and they intervened militarily. And I think throughout the conflict, their role has been changing, and they eventually went and played a mediatory role. And in the end, they ended up influencing the situation to persuade President Salva to sign the agreements. So we also want them to play a role in the implementation, where we are having some difficulties, and one of them is what you mentioned now, the issue of the states, which most people take as the issue of numbers of states. But the issue is not about number of states. The issue is about the demarcation of the borders of these states is not explicit in the decree, and so this has created a situation of conflict between communities based on land in South Sudan. And South Sudan being a communal society, land issues are very sensitive. So it is causing tension and war right now in South Sudan as we speak.
All right, talk to us about the other sticky points. I mean, we've reported about some of the important aspects of the peace deal, and there's some that we've seen some great progress and others that we haven't. We should have had a transitional unity government by now. In your view, Mabior, what's the holdup?
Well, this is it's a technical issue. You know, governments are formed based on constitutions, and so according to the agreements, before the transitional government is formed, you have to have a transitional constitution. So the agreement says that the transitional constitution will be the incorporation of the agreements into the constitution through a decree. And so once this happens, then the government of national unity is to be formed based on this. In the absence of this, there is no basis for forming a government. So it becomes difficult. And then the agreement was signed based on 10 states. And in the 10 states, you cannot form a government when the 10 states have been abolished by a decree. So there are some technical problems, which are impeding the formation of the government at the moment. But as SPLM in opposition, we have our names ready for submission. But if we form a government with the constitution of the 28 states, then it means that we are not implementing the agreement. It means that we have surrendered to the system which we were trying to reform.
Okay, how would you rate overall the implementation of the peace deal so far? We've had counter-accusations on both sides about violation of the ceasefire since it was signed in August. We now have the issue of the creation of the 18 states, but there also have been some progresses. So I'd like to know from you how you would rate the overall process so far with some of the successes and the challenges as well.
Well, the rule is you know is that things on paper, when you plan things on paper, they don't usually, you know, that things that you plan always work the way you plan them is the exception. So no agreement always goes the way that it is planned, but overall I would say that there's a lot of progress because we are in Juba. And we are continuing the dialogue despite the deadlock that is in the agreement. And there are positive voices for peace on all sides. That if we put our hands together, we will be able to push the agreement and outmaneuver the hardliners. With respect to the violations. The problem is that the government has refused to recognize our cantonment areas of troops in the areas of Greater Equatoria and Greater Barghazal, and they've only accepted our cantonment areas in Greater Upper Nile, which are the three regions of major regions of South Sudan. So the president made some unfortunate remarks the other day that these are bandits and they don't consider them as SPLA in opposition, and that they would hunt them like rats. And so it is a tragedy that is not being talked about that is happening in Western Equatoria, in the region of Greater Equatoria in South Sudan.
All right.
And this is just simply because some hardliners within the government, you know, I don't want to lump all the people in the government on one side, because there are many voices for peace in the government. But there are some hardliners who are in control of the army that are continuing the war in the name of not accepting our cantonment areas in these regions. So this is why the violations have continued.
All right. Okay.
And also because of the issue of no basis for formation of 28 states, so there's border clashes.
All right, Mabir, so what do you think your response, therefore, to that report from the UN monitoring panel that talks about an arms embargo that should be placed on all sides of this conflict in a bid perhaps to ensure, you know, adherence to the peace deal, to the cessation of violence?
From the beginning, the SPLM in opposition has been for release of the AU report and for justice and accountability. So we welcome all these things. The people of South Sudan need anything that can be done to stop this war. So we welcome anything that will promote stopping the war.
All right, Mabior, finally, before I let you go, I'd just like to ask you this, because Riek Machar has said he will not return to Juba to form that unity government until President Salva Kiir rescinds his decision on the creation of the new states. You know, so does he intend to stay in Uganda indefinitely? What happens, you know, if President Salva Kiir does not rescind his decision on the creation of the new states?
Well, we did not sign the agreement only with President Salva. There were many stakeholders, like the G10 signed the agreement, other political parties signed the agreement, and the IGAD countries were also witnesses to this agreement. And the international community also, you know, in general, the larger international community through Troika also were witnesses, and they are guarantors in this agreement. And so in case of a dispute, I think it will be taken to arbitration to these witnesses and guarantors to the peace. And so we will see what is the way forward from there. It's just unfortunate that this situation is happening, because meanwhile there's a security situation, you know, there's insecurity in the country, and it can be stopped through the implementation of the agreement.
Okay, all right. Thank you.